there's an interesting thing that experienced lucid dreamers around the world note, and it's what people call the void. We've been in the lucid dream 10 minutes, and then suddenly the visual imagery just disappears. And what you find yourself is kind of in this sparkling blackness. It's kind of like an old TV set, and you're hanging out in the void. Now, here's the thing. If you can keep your awareness together during that time, suddenly you'll watch as, oh, over here a bush appears. Oh, and now over here a car appears. Oh, and up there a house appears. And all of a sudden, you're watching the very beginning of a new lucid dream.
Welcome to the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds.
Hello and welcome to the Endless Possibilities Podcast. My name is Gareth, and today I'm introducing my latest guest, Robert Wagner. Robert is the author of a lucid dreaming book that I've had in my library for about 10 or 12 years. So I'm going to give a brief description on Robert. In 1975, Robert Wagner taught himself a simple technique to lucid dream, or become consciously aware of dreaming while in the dream state. Since that time, he has logged more than 1,000 lucid dreams and written 2 books: the acclaimed Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, now in its 15th printing, and the award-winning Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, with co-author Caroline McCready. Robert's books have been translated into 8 languages, and he has traveled the world giving lectures at universities and conferences and weekend workshops in this exciting area. A past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams, he also co-edits the online magazine Lucid Dreaming Experience. Robert, welcome to the show. Nice to have you on.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So I guess we'll jump straight in because I have so many questions. Can you explain to our viewers and listeners what exactly lucid dreaming is?
Right. So a lucid dream is any dream in which you realize within the dream that you're dreaming. You literally know, hey, this is a dream. I'm dreaming this. And it happened to me spontaneously when I was like 10 or 11 years old. I didn't quite understand it at the time. But in the dream, I was at the library looking at books, and all of a sudden, through the book stacks comes a little baby Tyrannosaurus Rex walking through the book stacks. And even at age 10 or 11, I thought, how can this be? Dinosaurs are extinct. And then I thought, oh, I'm dreaming. This is a dream. And so there for a moment, I realized, hey, this is a dream. So that's what it means. Anytime you realize within a dream you're dreaming, that's a lucid dream.
And obviously some time passed then, and you obviously went off to college, you started studying. What sparked your interest to reignite the lucid dreaming?
Yeah, actually, it was when I was a teenager in high school. I was reading this book by Carlos Castaneda called Journey to Ixtlan. And so Carlos Castaneda was a UCLA graduate student who was trying to study psychoactive plants like peyote and mescaline. And he found this shaman down in southwestern U.S. And the shaman in this book tells him to try and become aware within his dreams that he's dreaming. And he suggests that he could find his hands and use that to do so. And so I'm reading that and I'm thinking, you can really do this. You can induce a lucid dream. And so what I did, there wasn't a technique. So I just created a technique. And within 3 nights, I had my very first lucid dream. And so I was blown away. This was back in 1975. And the scientific evidence didn't emerge until the end of 1980. But I was blown away that you could become consciously aware within a dream and know that you're dreaming.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember being a kid as well, and kind of having dreams, but somehow in the back of my mind, knowing that I could actually wake up in the dreams. Now, it didn't happen for me until much later on. So what started to happen in the dreams? What started once you started becoming conscious in the dreams, like where did you take it? Where did you go with this?
Yes. So my very first consciously induced lucid dream was so amazing. I did this practice before I'd go to sleep. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And on the third night, I'm walking through my high school hallway, and my hands pop right in front of my face, and I go, "Oh my God, this is a dream." And it was so amazing to see these students over here and realize they're actually dream figures. And so I remember reaching out and touching the wall to see, what's a dream wall feel like. But it felt exactly like what you'd expect it to feel like. And so I thought, oh, that's really interesting that it's cool and nubby, just like it you would expect it to be. And so then I went on and had a really fascinating lucid dream experience. At the very end, I realized probably the first rule of lucid dreaming, which is don't get too excited or you'll wake up. Because at the very end, I took off flying and I got so excited, I immediately woke up. But after that very first lucid dream, I was totally hooked. And then from there on, I just began to use lucid dreaming initially just to have fun because you can fly around, you can go through walls, you can walk on water, you can talk to dream figures, you can do all sorts of just wild things. But as I kept going deeper and deeper, I started to see that there were actually principles in lucid dreaming, that it was actually a little bit more dynamic than what you would normally think. And so I just began to learn the rules as I kept exploring and going deeper.
And okay, so in one of your interviews I was listening to, I heard you say that you asked one of the dream characters for information, and then information came from behind, up above the dream character.
Yeah, yeah. So to explain what happened, so it was around January of 1981. That's when here in the US, the magazine Psychology Today came out with the scientific evidence for lucid dreaming
Mm.
in an article written by a researcher, Stephen LaBerge. And I was blown away because I was a psychology student, and finally, someone provided the evidence for it. Since I'd been doing it for 5 years, but could barely talk to anybody about lucid dreaming because it hadn't been scientifically discovered yet. So within a year or two, I heard about this group that were lucid dreamers who had a monthly goal to achieve, and they called themselves the Lucid Dream Explorers Group. And so I signed on to be a part of this group, and every month we had a goal to achieve in our lucid dreams. And this went on for 3 years, if you can imagine having a monthly lucid dream goal to achieve.
Was this in person, Robert? Was this like an
No,
in-person group?
this was back in the day before the internet and all that, and so basically there was one person in California who was the host of it, and she would send out by mail, here's the goal
Wow.
this month, and then you would write down your lucid dream and you would mail it to her. Then she would make photocopies of everybody's lucid dreams and send them out to everybody, and that was the process. So I remember that month. It was 1985, and so by this time I'd been a lucid dreamer for 10 years. And the goal was find out what the dream figures in your lucid dream represent. And so I thought, oh, that'll be easy. That's no big deal. So I became lucidly aware, followed a woman into an office building, and now I'm in this office, and there's a receptionist, two women, and a gentleman in a three-piece suit, an older gentleman. And so I know it's a dream, and I remember the goal. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to find out what the dream figures represent. I walk up to the gentleman and I ask him, "Excuse me, but what do you represent?" And suddenly the strangest thing happened. Instead of the gentleman responding, the dream figure responding, which I thought would happen, all of a sudden a voice from high above him kind of boomed out a partial response. So the partial response didn't make sense. So I looked up to where this voice was coming from, and there's nothing to see. I just looked up and I said, I repeated what I had heard and said, "Now what?" And then it gave the full response of what this dream figure represented. And I go, okay, now I understand what this dream figure represents. I'm going to wake up and write down my lucid dream, which I did. But the next morning, I started to think, what was this voice, this non-visible voice, answering my question in the lucid dream. And then I began to wonder, is there an awareness behind the dream? Can you communicate with your unconscious mind in a lucid dream? Are you so deep within the psyche that you actually have an avenue to connect with a responsive awareness? And so after that, in my lucid dreams, I began to explore this. I would ask to see things, I would request things, I would ask to experience a concept. And I was just blown away by the creativity and knowledge of this inner awareness, the responsive unconscious mind.
So, Robert, okay, first things, the characters. So, are they sort of like NPCs, right? They're just kind of walking around playing a role, but they don't have free will. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, this is a complicated area when it comes to dream figures, because through my 40 some years of lucid dreaming and interacting consciously with dream figures, I realized that all dream figures are not created equal. So in some lucid dreams, you go up to a dream figure and ask them a question, and they just have nothing to say. It's like they're empty or hollow. Other dream figures, you'll ask them and they'll give a response, but it's basically kind of gibberish. It doesn't really make sense. And then there's another set of dream figures. You ask them a question and you'll get a very thoughtful reply. And in fact, there's some dream figures that seem to be so consciously aware that I remember a story from my friend Lucy. She became lucidly aware. She went up to a dream figure and said, "Do you know I'm dreaming you?" And the dream figure replied, "How do you know I'm not dreaming you?" And then the lucid dreamer said, "Well, look, I can fly." And then the dream figure said, "Well, look, I can fly too." And so they kept trying to one up each other, but each of them could do exactly what the other could do. And at the end of the lucid dream, they both sat on the curb and tried to figure out whose dream it was. So that's when you get to a whole new level of dream figure that seems to have the same abilities that you have. And sometimes I've been surprised. There have been some dream figures that seem to go beyond that. So again, that all dream figures are not created equal. It's a complex area.
So do you think somehow the dream realities are overlapping between two different dreamers?
It makes you wonder, it might be another dreamer, but it might be a portion of yourself that is much more aware. And so for example, here's a way that a person, in my book, I've encouraged people to kind of experiment with it. I was reading a book where the person said that dream figures oftentimes were thought forms. So you needed something to represent your thought, your idea at that moment, and then you relate to it. And so I became lucidly aware. I stabilized lucid dream, and I announced, now all thought forms must disappear, because there are like a dozen dream figures in my lucid dream. And what was amazing, 8 of them immediately disappeared. But then there was this group of like 4 dream figures who were like looking over at me like, "Didn't you realize that we were different than those other thought forms that you made disappear?" So it's really a little bit interesting to think, how could you create a figure? So like, think of a novelist creating a novel. By page 200 of their novel, as they're typing along, whatever this fictional novel is, the characters have actually kind of become alive in their mind, if nowhere else. One time I was giving a talk with public radio about creativity and dreams and lucid dreams, and they asked for people to call in if they'd ever had a lucid dream that they used creatively. And this one gentleman said that he was a professional novelist, and that when he got stuck writing a fictional novel, he would try to have a lucid dream. And in the lucid dream, he would announce for his novel characters to come and visit him. And he said suddenly they would start appearing from all around. And then he would ask him, "What's wrong with this novel?" or "How can we improve this novel?" And he said oftentimes they'd give him brilliant responses on how to improve things. So again, what I'm trying to get here is, if you put a lot of mental energy into an idea of a figure, you can kind of empower that figure. A lot of a thought form is just kind of like a mayfly. It's just there for a moment. But if you focus on some issue or something, you can actually create something a little bit more durable, a little bit more deeper and more thoughtful. So again, this is really a complex area.
So would that then be an interface that you can use to teach you? And do you have access to the same character, maybe again when you come back into another dream? Does it stick around?
Right. That's interesting. There have been some results or some people who have had that experience of seeing the same dream figure over and over. In fact, there's an interesting story that comes from the 4th or 5th century BC, that's in the letters of St. Augustine. So he reported on this lucid dream that a Christian physician in Carthage had had. And the way it happened, one night this physician saw this radiant youth, and the figure just seemed to kind of glow with energy. And so then he woke up and he realized, oh, it was just a dream. Then the next night, suddenly here comes that radiant youth again. And this time the radiant youth stops and asks Gennardius, where have we met before? And Gennardius said, in last night's dream. And suddenly Gennardius asked him, where are you right now? And Gennardius realized that he was in bed asleep. And then the radiant youth asked him, with what eyes do you see me? If your eyes are closed, with what eyes do you see me? And Gennardius couldn't really respond because he couldn't figure out, how can you see when you're in the dreams, when you're in the sleep state, because your eyes are obviously closed. And then the radiant youth, the physical eyes are closed. And then the radiant youth told him not to worry about the after-death experience, basically, because even then there would be a faculty of perception by which you could perceive. And so Gennardius woke up and wrote this down, and somehow it became one of the letters of St. Augustine way back when. But what we're seeing here is a recurring dream figure. On the second night, he sees him and goes, wait a second, where have I seen them before? Oh, I saw him in a dream. Oh, that means I'm dreaming right now. And so sometimes that's what happens. You'll have a dream figure that appears and you'll realize that you've seen it before, but it was in a dream. And so logically, you're dreaming right now. So again, dream figures are curious in this regard. I've even heard of some lucid dreamers becoming lucid and asking a dream figure, could you return in tomorrow's dream and help me become lucidly aware? And some lucid dreamers have reported success with this, that when they can get an active dream figure to respond affirmatively, they appear in the next night's dream and help them become lucidly aware. So again, it's complicated. This is really a complex area.
Yeah. So do you think that those dream characters might actually be guides with their own free will, if they can return and induce a lucid dream the next night? It seems like they have some sort of intelligence, right? They're not just a character just playing a part.
Yeah. So what I would say, dream figures vary. They go from the most empty to ones that are apparently endowed with insight and awareness and conscious activity. To call them guides, I don't know if that would be correct. It might be just more correct to say that I call them in my book, my first book, I call them independent agents. They seem to act with an independence separate from the lucid dreamer. And the way I came up with this idea, early on, probably 6 or 7 years into lucid dreaming, one time I was playing around. There was a big crowd of people and I was flying around. And then I thought, for the fun of it, I'm just going to fly down, and anyone who has a hat on, I'll knock it off. And so I'd do a loop and knock off a hat, do another loop, knock off a hat. And I was coming in for like the 4th hat to knock off. And I was getting ready to knock it off when suddenly one of the dream figures reached up and grabbed me in flight and stopped me from flying. And I thought, whoa, what's this? And so I decided to wake up. But that's what I would call an independent agent. It was independent of my desires, my intent, my role, my energy. it was a dream figure who was getting my attention by doing something outside of my schema. So again, I don't want to guides, I don't know, because a guide sounds like they're taking you someplace, and an independent agent is just showing you, wait a second, there's more going on here than you're aware of.
Okay. So the terrain in a lucid dream. So what is generating that scene? What do you have you gotten to that? What's behind the scene that
Right.
we enter in lucid dreams?
Yeah. Yeah. This is really an interesting question, and I'm glad you brought it up because I just never get asked this question, but it's really kind of central. The, there's think of your normal dream. You know, you wake up in the middle of the night and you remember your dream, but what happened right before the dream began? Who ever sees the beginning of a dream? Whoever sees the moment before and the start and on. So as you might suspect, virtually everyone says they've never seen a dream begin, that they remember it and they can think of it as the beginning portion, but to watch it start up, they haven't seen. So here's why I bring that up. When it comes to the terrain, there's an interesting thing that experienced lucid dreamers around the world note, and it's what people call, they have an experience of the void, and what we mean by that is lucid dreamers. So we're in a lucid dream, we're exploring, we're doing what we want to do, we've been in the lucid dream 5 or 10 minutes or whatever, and then suddenly the visual imagery just disappears. And now what you find yourself is kind of in this sparkling blackness. It's kind of like an old TV set. When you turn it to a channel that had no signal, it would kind of be this black sparkling, and you're hanging out in the void, just in this sparkling blackness. Now, here's the thing. If you can keep your awareness together during that time, it might take 4 or 5 minutes of hanging out in the void, but suddenly you'll watch as, oh, over here a bush appears. Oh, and now over here a car appears. Oh, and up there a house appears. Oh, and here a tree begins. And all of a sudden, you're watching the very beginning of a new lucid dream, or the very beginning of a dream. And what's interesting about it is how you begin at that moment to have rapid eye movement. Oh, looking at the bush. Oh, looking at the tree. Oh, there's the house. Oh, there's the car. And all of a sudden you realize that, oh, now the visual screen is filling up with imagery, and now your eyes are tracking all of that. And so I think lucid dreaming explains, or this experience of being in the void, and then the void finally coming to an end, and a new dream starting up. It explains why we have rapid eye movement, because in this kind of sensory screen, we're seeing the emergence of new things that are popping up, and we're tracking all of that. But so what I would say, so this is a long preamble to the terrain, and so in many respects, I would say the terrain is basically the mind. And so in some respects, when you go into the void, it's kind of like the mind at rest, or the mind without it getting expressed. And then eventually energy, ideational energy, mental energy, emotional energy appears with sufficient force to, oh, now we're going to create a tree. Oh, now we're going to create a house. Now we're going to create a bush. Now we're going to create a scene. Now we're going to create a story. And suddenly the dream starts up again. So there, it's kind of a psychological terrain of energy. You kind of see psychological energy expressed into symbolic objects, and then the story begins. And if you stay lucidly aware, you can kind of roll with it there. But it's, again, that's another lovely deep question.
Okay, and you spoke about the higher consciousness coming in and answering questions. Do you think that that can somehow be related to what's sort of rendering these scenes? Do you think that that could be like, okay, so what I'm trying to get at is, right, a lot of times when we dream, they're very symbolic and they seem to have lessons, right? We spend 8 hours every night going into the dream state, and it just seems to be a great place to learn and work out problems that we have during the day, right? So by us becoming lucid in the dream, it's kind of like we're peeking behind the curtains, right? And maybe we're seeing, that there is an intelligence there that's creating these terrains for us to learn in. And like, are we like, is lucid dreaming something maybe that higher consciousness, does it frown upon it? Is it like, is it like a cheat code we're doing, and they're kind of like, they just let it happen?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So again, once you get to this level where you become lucidly aware, you stabilize the lucid dream, you ignore the dream figures, and you just reach out to, you can call it your unconscious mind or your larger awareness or your inner self, whatever you want to call it. Just ask it a question. So for beginners, I'd suggest they just take it simple and just ask something like, "Hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. Show me something important for me to see." Then normally what happens, either one thing will suddenly appear, or sometimes the entire lucid dream will change, and you'll be looking at something important for you to see. And normally when you wake up from that lucid dream in the morning, you'll understand exactly what it is that you're seeing there. So not only can you ask, show me something important for me to see. Well, one person told me that seemed too heavy, so they wanted to start really simple, and they just ask, "Hey, dream, show me something hilarious for me to see." And suddenly this multicolored gorilla appeared walking down the road that had this incredible groovy kind of walk, and it was just absolutely hilarious. And the lucid dreamer said they just burst out laughing, when they saw this thing. But what happens though is as you go deeper, you begin to see that, well, how much does this inner awareness know? Is it just reflecting back to me my own ideas, or does it extend beyond that? And how creative is it? Well, one time I asked, "Hey, dream, show me my life as if it was a painting." And suddenly, if you can imagine in the sky, a painting appear that's about 30 meters long and 10 meters high, all done up with all sorts of, symbolically things painted on it. And I thought, think of the creativity that it took to come up with that in just a microsecond. And I think that's when you begin to realize that this inner awareness, this responsive, whatever it is, has creativity that's just profound. Even with AI, you have to wait 3 or 4 seconds to get a response. This is just like boom. This inner awareness just comes back with things that are so what I would say is that from my interactions with this inner awareness, it's purposeful, it's educational, it's responsive. Sometimes it takes into account that the lucid dreamer isn't ready. Some experienced lucid dreamers have told me what they've requested, and then they hear this non-visible voice say, "You don't seem ready for the experience that you request." Because sometimes if you ask to experience a conceptual idea and then you're thrust into this conceptual idea, it's a powerful force. So again,
Okay.
it seems aware, knowledgeable, has some sort of feeling sense for the lucid dreamer. And so it, in my book, I mentioned that I think it qualifies all of the characteristics that Carl Jung said, if you were going to show that an inner awareness existed, it had to show these 10 characteristics. And in my book, I check off with examples. Look how it showed this in all of these examples.
Okay. So I've had lucid dreams, and they're so real. I would say they're even more real. Like when everything's in super high definition. I remember one time I was in a forest, and I kind of ducked down to go underneath a branch that had fallen over a trench. And when I came up the other side, I became lucid, and I could see all these snowflakes coming down. I could see almost like as if they were like high definition. I could see every shape of the snowflake. So like, I mean, it almost seems like it's like a supercomputer creating it, like something digital that has memory. Do you think that's a
Right.
possibility?
Well, I what I would say the supercomputer is our unconscious mind, our inner awareness. And lucid dreaming is a technique when we can finally explore dreaming, the dream state, and we can finally, by virtue of interacting with this inner awareness, we can finally begin to explore its creativity and its knowing, and know that it's actually part of us. We like to focus on the conscious self and the ego self and what's going on in this waking world, but every night we spend about 2 hours in dreaming, and so why is that important? I think part of it is that this unconscious, this inner awareness, actually coexists with the waking self, and actually in its way is trying to educate and advance the waking self. And it does this through dreams, through intuitions, through impulses, through lucid dreams, as long as the conscious ego self will go along with it.
If we can learn in just the regular dream state, what is the purpose of us becoming lucid? What's like, why does that happen? And I mentioned earlier, is it like a sort of have we cheated the dream in some way?
Well, I don't think we've cheated. I think what we've done is moved to a new level, to a better level. Now, instead of being unconscious in the dream and just reacting to whatever happens, now we have the ability, when we become lucid, to think about it, to ask questions, to oh, if I do this, what's going to happen? And so now with that consciousness, we have a new capacity to begin to relate to this awareness with greater awareness, with greater consciousness. And so I think we're on the cusp of finding out our expanded self. It's interesting. Carl Jung wrote a book, The Undiscovered Self. And I think lucid dreaming is part of this new movement towards discovering the larger self and realizing that we're actually connected to all of this. We just haven't been aware of it.
Okay. So what are lucid dreams trying to teach us? Because I've had fear tests, like I've really important decisions come up in these lucid dreams where I've had to, I've thought I did the right thing. I saw something happen, I ran over, I helped, I got down to the end of the road, and then I realized that by me interfering, actually I didn't help. I just, I somehow muddled up the experience. So what's the purpose? I mean,
Right.
it seems that like as humans, it's all about like making conscious decisions to become more loving and to evolve, right? So in the dream state, it's similar, right?
Well, I think it's a little bit broader, is what I'll say. It's more broad, because here's what I began to see in lucid dreaming. Again, you have to remember, I taught myself how to lucid dream in 1975. Then the scientific evidence came out in 1980, 81. And so I had 5 years to kind of explore it, really without anyone's assistance. I just learned by doing. And here's what I began to learn. I began to learn the importance of a person's beliefs. So if I became lucidly aware and I believed that I could fly through this wall, then if I truly believed I could fly through it. But if I came up to the same wall and didn't believe I could or expected to have problems, I would bounce off the wall, even though it was made out of dream stuff. And so I began to see, oh, our beliefs and expectations actually matter in terms of what is going to be our experience. And so I learned that I could I could change my expectations suddenly and get what I wanted. But if I expected to have trouble, then I was going to have trouble. If I believed everything was going to work out, then everything would work out. So you begin to realize, oh, you're being educated in the nature of how the unconscious mind works. The unconscious mind works according to beliefs and expectations. And you see this in hypnosis. If you believe that your grandma, under hypnosis, that your grandma is now coming to visit, suddenly you'll turn to your right and start interacting with grandma in this hypnotic state. It's what they call a positive hallucination. But if you can also have a negative hallucination as well. But what I'm saying is, you begin to see in lucid dreams, beliefs and expectations are important. You also begin to see what you focus on is important because you're in this environment, and you can focus on that woman in the bikini over there, or you can focus on that guy in the spiritual robes over there. It's your choice in the lucid dream. And so you begin to see the power of focus. And then you begin to see the power of intent. What's my intent in this experience? So you begin to see that your mind and how you think about things actually determines what's going to happen next, what's going to go. And so part of it is seeing the environment, and part of it is also how am I responding to the environment. Oh, and if I believe that dream figure is going to be trouble, here he comes. Now he's trouble. He's got a knife. We're going to get into a fight or whatever. So first you got to start to see your mind. Then the next thing I think you begin to see is how we as lucid dreamers and we as people stay in our comfort zone. If we'll stay in this kind of narrow area that we have no worries in because it's our comfort zone. But anytime we come up against our comfort zone and there's some fear, then we retreat. And so what my lucid dreams taught me is that I had to resolve my fears. And so it kept showing me in lucid dreams, kind of like tests, where I could either choose to resolve the fear or retreat. And as I began to resolve fears, I became a different person. It was really, really incredible. And also I began to have this experience probably 10 to 15 years into lucid dreaming. I'd be in the lucid dream and I'd hear this non-visible voice say, trust, nothing to fear. Or sometimes I'd see a banner in the sky in the lucid dream, trust, nothing to fear. Because again, we as conscious ego selves, we retreat from what we fear. We don't learn. We might fight it or we might run away, but we're not learning anything. And part of this inner educational environment of lucid dreaming is to teach us to resolve fears, to resolve issues, to see our beliefs and expectations reflected in the experience. And then you can shift those over to the waking world and think, oh gosh, I'm expecting trouble here, but what if I shift my expectation and expect this all to work out? And then miraculously it all works out and you think, wow, what just happened there? So you begin to see the mechanism of the mind is what I'm saying. And then when you begin to interact with the inner awareness, and that took me 10 years before I began to interact with the inner awareness, it was kind of like the second lesson. The first lesson was understanding how the unconscious mind works. The second lesson was understanding that there's more to the unconscious mind than the conscious waking ego self, that it's connected to this larger awareness that has greater creativity and insights beyond the conscious mind. So again, it's a vast educational experience. It really, truly is.
And that inner awareness, could that be our higher self?
I think it could be, but here's the thing. Oftentimes when people think about higher self, they kind of think of it in spiritual terms and all. And what I see from this inner awareness is, first, it's an education in the psyche, in the nature of the mind, in the nature of your thoughts and your reactions and your emotions. It's helping people understand that before it gets into what people would call higher level things. And oftentimes I think that's part of the problem with some lucid dreamers. They learn how to become lucidly aware, they stabilize the lucid dream, and then they immediately try to do PhD stuff and fall on their face. You've got to learn that there, but you won't get there on day one. The kindergarten kid isn't going to be, writing mathematical proofs, on day one. You got to go through the lessons to understand things.
Mm. Yeah. Okay. And then I'm just going to see OBEs. Is there a correlation between lucid dreaming and OBEs, the out of body state? Because I've had both, and I would have lucid dreams that would then sort of morph into an OBE, right? I would have a lucid dream, become lucid in it, and then eventually the dream would collapse. I'd wake up in the bed with vibrations running up and down my body, and I could get out of my body and travel. So there's definitely something connecting the two.
Yeah. But normally what I tell folks is that a lucid dream and an out of body is kind of like talking about a house cat and a mountain lion. They might
Okay.
be from the same family of animals, but they're not exactly the same. They do share some same characteristics. You know, they have that feline body and all of that and claws and whatever, but they're not exactly the same. And so again, a lucid dream, you realize within the dream you're dreaming. You might see something strange and go, wait a second, that's too strange. Oh, this is a dream. And out of body, you might be trying to fall asleep and suddenly start to hear this humming and buzzing around your body or around your head. You might suddenly find yourself 6 feet above the bed, looking around your bedroom, thinking, how did I get up here? You know, nowhere in that did you realize within a dream you're dreaming. So by definition, those kind of experiences are different. Or if you have a heart attack and now all of a sudden you're floating on the ceiling, you know, of the hospital.
An
Yeah, that,
NDE. Yeah.
that's also, you know, a different experience. That's not realizing within a dream you're dreaming. But here's the problem. Sometimes you become lucid at night and you really, when you think about it, you don't recall, how did I become lucid? But like one time I found myself totally lucidly aware, and this Native American was sitting across from me and was teaching me something. And he kept going on and on and on with this lesson. And then finally, after about 10 minutes, I looked at him and said, this is a very stable lucid dream. And he looked at me and said, shook his head, no. He said, this is not a lucid dream. And so occasionally you'll have these strange experiences that you're just lucid from the get-go. And is that a lucid dream or an out of body or some other kind of experience? But
So
there
what
does seem
shifted?
pardon me?
So what shifted that it wasn't a lucid dream? Where were you in that instance?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. I don't know exactly where you are. You're aware, you're physically asleep, but you're very aware, and you're also being educated in the moment. So I don't know exactly if we have a name for that place. So I remember reading some books that would call this the night school. There's some people
The
who
night
said that
school. Yeah.
they would show up in the night school. But to your point, there is a little bit of a continuum, I think, between lucid dreams and out of bodies. What I've done and write about in my book, my first book, is that I would become lucidly aware, and then I would stabilize lucid dream. Then to test this out, I would announce, now take me to the next form or to the next level. And suddenly, boom, I would find myself in the kitchen of our house, which is like 5 feet below where I was sleeping. And I would fly throughout the neighborhood and just amazed at I call it a reality plus one. It's very close to what you would see in waking reality, but
Mm,
occasionally the mind can make things appear that aren't actually there. So
yeah.
again, that's shifting from a lucid dream into an out of body. And I've also heard from people who've done the opposite, where they've gone from an out of body state into a lucid dream
That's
state.
happened to me as well. Yeah.
It was interesting, kind of the father of out of body experiences, Bob Monroe from the
I was just about to mention him. Yeah.
yeah. He said that to him, the difference between lucid dreams and out of bodies, you found yourself in a stable environment. Things were stable. But in a lucid dream, I might look this way for 5 seconds and then turn around over here. And now there's a desert over here where 5 seconds before there wasn't. It's more of a psychological environment where the mind is influencing things very rapidly. And so it's kind of realm where you kind of learn how to educate the mind. But he said
So
in
it's
out
more
of bodies, it was
fluid.
pretty stable. It's much more fluid, much more
It's
fluid.
much more fluid. And I think Bob would call that locale too, when he would get out of body. And it seems to be just slightly out of sync, but it seems to be a replica of our, yeah, but it's just slightly, sometimes like you might look and there might be an old telephone that doesn't exist in your house, but it's in the corner.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it was funny in this online magazine. I was so happy when we got a lucid dream submitted to our free online magazine, the Lucid Dreaming Experience. And it was from this father who had an interest in lucid dreaming, but he discovered his 8-year-old daughter was having lucid dreams all the time. And so he decided that they should conduct an experiment. And so he told his daughter that he was going to take a piece of paper and write down a number on it. And he was going to set it somewhere in the house, and that he wanted her in a lucid dream to find that number and tell him what the number was. And so the next morning, his daughter told him, "Well, I found the number last night, and it's the number 8." And the father goes, "Oh my God, that's right. How did you do that? And where did you find it?" And she goes, "Oh, I decided that why should I go looking for it? I just went up to you in the lucid dream and asked you, what number did you write down on that piece of paper? And you told me." And so anyway, again, it's interesting, when you hear those kind of experiences, because it does seem to kind of blur the lines of what are we really engaged here? Are we engaged in kind of a interconnected oneness in the dream experience, in the lucid dream experience, or was this little girl out of body and did this? It's really a fascinating when you begin to do these inner explorations and try to make these kind of differentiations.
Mm. And what about loved ones who turn up, like deceased loved ones who turn up and
Right.
maybe want to give us a message or tell us they love us?
Yeah. This is really interesting. Just in the history of dreaming, there's a lot of these visitation dreams where a deceased relative or loved one appears in a dream, sometimes with a message, and sometimes they provide information that was unknown to the person, and then they later wake up and verify. But what happens for lucid dreamers is oftentimes when I see someone, I'll think, wait a second, that person's been dead for 10 years now. Oh, this is a dream, because it doesn't make sense. How can they be here if they've been dead for 10 years? And now, when you're lucidly aware, now you have the capacity to ask questions. And so that's what I always encourage people to do. Dream figure, ask him open-ended questions. And so, like, one time I saw this ladder, and coming down the ladder was my father. And I thought, wait a second, Dad died 3 years ago. This must be a dream. And so I immediately became lucid. But then I started to laugh because he had such a bad haircut. And I thought, oh my God, he can't even get a good haircut in the after death state. And then I started to think, well, wait a second, is this my dad as a dream symbol, as a projection of my mind, or is this my dad in an after death or a spiritual state? And so he comes down the ladder and greets me. We greet each other. And so I decided to ask him questions. I said, "Hey, Dad, you're from the land of the dead. When do you think Mom's going to pass away?" And he looked a little bit surprised, and he said, "Oh, she's going to probably pass away in 2 to 6 years." And I said, "Of what?" And he said, "A heart condition." And that really surprised me. My mom had never had any heart problems. Then I asked him one more question, and he responded. And then he said, "Please be quiet. I came to tell you things." And he spent the next 5 or 10 minutes telling me things about the family. So in the morning, I woke up from the lucid dream and wrote it all down. And it was interesting. Almost 2 years later, it was like 23 months and a few days later, my mom went to the hospital and almost passed away of a heart condition. And she had never had any heart problems. And then about 3 years after that, and a few months, she went back to the hospital and almost died of a heart condition that was caused by a prescribed medication that was causing heart troubles. But she made it through that 2 to 6 year period and went on to live a long time. But again, that's the interesting difference in a lucid dream. In a lucid dream, you can stop and think, okay, what questions do I have? And sometimes you get information that's outside of your knowing that you can later verify. In our magazine, there's been some wonderful examples, but it's really an interesting area when you think about it.
So was it your dad, or do you think it was a part of your higher self using the interface of your dad to give information?
Yeah, so that's a $1 million question right there. Is it my dad in spiritual form coming to see me? Is it the mental ideas of my dad coming to visit me? Is it, just a big drama put on by my inner awareness, to kind of make me pay attention more? That those are all really hard to say. What I
Yeah.
would say though is in my first book, I have an entire chapter on this. And my friend Ed Kellogg, who's a wonderful lucid dreamer, he did experiments. He would 3 or 4 months after one of his friends or acquaintances passed away, he would try to find him in a lucid dream. And it was interesting. Sometimes he would be led to where they were, and they would be surrounded by all the hobbies that they had when they were younger, which were all unknown to Ed. Ed knew them as 80-year-old people, but now they were surrounded by the hobbies they had when they were 10 and 20 and 30 years old. And oftentimes they had adopted the characteristics of being 10 or 20 or 30 years old. And Ed was really surprised because he didn't know they had curly hair back then, that, he knew them when they were bald. And so after the end of the lucid dream, Ed would write down very detailed notes, and he'd write the family and say, I went on a lucid dream and met your deceased relative. Would you like to hear about the experience? And if they said yes, he'd visit with them. And oftentimes, while telling them what he experienced, they would all burst out with laughter and, oh, you don't know this, but he had this hobby of collecting just exactly what you said. And oh my God, you don't know this, but here's a picture of him when he was 20 and he had this giant afro. And oh my God, you don't know this. And the result of it was that it appeared that Ed was interacting with people in the after death state. Sometimes what was interesting too, some of these people were still in a hospital in their after death state. They were still carrying forward that idea of their ailment that had, that they'd spent the last 3 years of their life fighting, and they still remained in a kind of hospital, that they still hadn't really awakened to the fact that they were, in the after death state. So you have experiments like that would suggest that in the after death state we do carry on in some fashion, but again, it's another complicated area.
It is, it is. And funny enough, I was into all of this. Like really, I went down the Bob Monroe rabbit hole, the soul retrievals, the Bruce Moen was another one. I read all his books. And I learned to get into these states where I could find people who were stuck in this loop. They just didn't really realize that they had died. And I could go and I could say, hi, how are you? Listen, I'm here to let you know that you're actually stuck, and I want to bring you off to the next part where we can move you on. And it seems that there are beings that are just stuck in these loops, not knowing. I had another experience where I was having OBEs, and used to roll out of my body, and sometimes I would roll off the bed and fall through the floor. And one time I landed in my sitting room, and there was two teenage girls sat on the floor with cushions on their laps talking to one another. And I was kind of stood in the corner, and I kind of, looked at them, and they both turned and looked at me. They could see me, and they got scared and they ran through the wall screaming. So it seems that there are beings that have their own, consciousness and free will, but they're stuck somewhere. And have you come across them in the lucid dream states?
Yeah, I recall once my wife's boss, the spouse died, and I was away on a business trip. I was out in Detroit or someplace, and I was really sorry to hear that because she was a lovely person. So
Yeah.
so anyway, it was either that night or the next night. I found myself walking down a stairway, and coming up the stairway was my wife's boss and his deceased wife. And I went up to her and I said, Dahlia, I'm so sorry to hear that you've passed away, and I want you to know that I won't be able to attend the funeral. I'm on a business trip. And and they both looked at each other like, funeral, passed away, and they immediately began to run down the stairs the way they'd come up. So again, I think especially sometimes in the early days, especially, some people haven't quite come to the realization that they've transitioned, that they've moved to the after death state. It's quite interesting. I did have a niece who became a lucid dreamer, and she told me lucid dreams had no meaning. And I said, well, if you want to find out if they have meaning, just stop in the lucid dream and say, hey, dream, show me something important. And so she did that the first time, and suddenly a blue hallway appeared, and at the end of it was a little white-haired lady. And she goes down there and realizes it's her great grandmother who passed away when she was like 3 or 4 years old. And the great grandmother says, Jane, you have such wonderful timing. And my niece, lucidly aware, asks, what do you mean I have wonderful timing? And the great grandmother said, I get out of purgatory tomorrow. And my little niece was so unchurched, or she had to ask me, what's this purgatory thing? And I said, well, it's kind of, you're kind of in a holding area before you move on. But and she went on to tell my niece something that she thought was strange, but only her mother could confirm. And so I told her, you need to call your mom and ask her if what great grandma said in the lucid dream was correct. And the mother was stunned. She burst into tears. She couldn't believe it. So again, it's interesting, and lucid dreaming allows us to experiment in these situations and see if we can find out something outside of our knowing, because in that way, then it would seem to confirm that something happened, that you received information outside of your knowing. So there's something going on there.
Okay, fascinating. So I imagine now most of the viewers and listeners are probably trying to figure out how they can do these lucid dreams, right? And I mean, I would recommend them to go and get your book, right? So we'll link to your book down below, because I've had it on audiobook, and I had it on my Kindle maybe from 12 years ago. It's a fabulous book. Actually, I occasionally listen to it going to bed. So can you give us a few tips that people can use to start maybe exploring lucid dreaming themselves?
Right. So there's a lot of techniques, but I really think that the simple ones are the best. And some of these simple ones appeared in around 1980, when the scientific evidence for lucid dreaming first came out. So if you're a total beginner, I really like the technique that I use to become lucid. And here's what I suggest. So at night, when you're getting ready for bed, right before you go to bed, just sit in your bed and look at the palms of your hands, while telling yourself in your mind, just softly, you're just encouraging, you're suggesting, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Just say that repeatedly for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and then fall asleep. If you do that every night, eventually some night you're going to be walking along and boom, your hands will pop in front of your face, or you'll find yourself climbing a ladder and see your hands and think, wait, my hands? Oh, this is a dream. Because what you're doing is you're making the sight of your hands as a symbol that this is a dream. That's the first thought that comes to your mind. And that's what we call a conditioned response. So that's a really simple, easy technique that a beginner could use. If you've had a few lucid dreams, one thing that I found very helpful is just what I call the power of suggestion. So in regular dreams, we normally just accept whatever happens. But if we suggest to ourselves that we're going to be more critically aware, and if we notice anything strange, then we'll become lucid, then we've kind of primed our mind to become lucid. So I would suggest to myself, tonight in my dreams, I'll be much more aware. And when I notice anything strange, I'll realize I'm dreaming. But tonight in my mind, I'm going to be much more, or tonight in my dreams, I'll be much more aware. And when I notice anything strange, I'll realize I'm dreaming. And so that night, when you see the Queen Mother walk down your sidewalk in a bathing suit, you just don't accept it. Oh, she's going to the seacoast and it's very warm outside. You don't make up these kind of dream rationales. Instead, you go, wait a second, what's the Queen doing on my sidewalk? And what's she doing in a bathing suit? This doesn't make any sense. Oh, this is a dream. So again, just the power of suggestion. Tonight in my dreams, I'll be more critically aware. And when I notice anything strange, I'll realize I'm dreaming. So those would be some of the ideas. If you're good at visualization, you could do this. So imagine, and this is an ancient technique, imagine at the base of your throat, there's a lit candle. And that candlelight stands for the light of awareness. So as you're going to sleep, imagine that there's a candle at the base of your throat and it's lit. And that candlelight is the light of awareness. And suddenly, when I've done this successfully, suddenly I see a candle at the base of my throat that's illuminating the room. And I go, oh my God, this is a dream. I'm dreaming this. This is a lucid dream. but that's an ancient technique. Because one thing that we haven't really covered, lucid dreaming has been brought up in spiritual traditions for
Yeah.
many thousands of years, in
Yoga
native and
Nidra.
shamanic traditions, and other wisdom traditions. So it has an incredible legacy or history behind it. And so any of those three techniques would be good. But here's one thing I want to tell folks, and this was the lesson I learned early on in lucid dreaming. You can't get too excited during the lucid dream or you'll wake up. So you can get excited, you can get, thrilled and happy and joyful and all that kind of stuff. But if you get too excited, that's when you wake up. And so if something strange happens, like let's say there's a knock at the door and you go and open up the door and it's Tom Cruise delivering a pizza. And suddenly you think, wait a second, there's no way Tom Cruise is delivering pizzas in my neighborhood. This has to be a dream. But now you get so excited. Oh my God, Tom Cruise is here. I got to get an autograph or whatever. If you get too excited, you wake up. So what I do when I feel like I'm getting excited or way too excited, I'll tell myself to calm down. Any mental suggestion you give yourself or any vocalized command like stay calm, immediately will reduce your emotion. Or if I'm looking at something exciting like Tom Cruise at my front door, then I'll look down at the floor or something boring, just to kind of keep it cool. So that's the first number one lesson that folks learn. If you get too excited, you're going to pop out. So stay cool, stay calm.
So I noticed a couple of months ago, I was making breakfast. Every morning I would get up, I would crack 4 eggs, put them into the pan and start cooking them. And on this particular time, I cracked one of the eggs and the whole frying pan was just this one giant egg with a big yolk in the middle. And I thought, that's strange. I said, normally I have 4 yolks. And I immediately knew I was dreaming. But the dream sort of felt like it kind of went a bit dark and I couldn't really have any focus or clarity. That seemed to be a problem for people as well, that it gets murky and dark. And have you got any tips for getting beyond that part?
Yeah. So one thing I found, whenever I have become lucidly aware and it's kind of like murky or whatever, I'll shout out greater awareness now or more awareness now. And then it's like someone turns up the lights. And so whether you're reaching out to your
Okay.
unconscious mind or whatever, oftentimes that helps to just announce greater awareness now, more clarity now. And then the lights go up and the lucid dream changes. I think sometimes in those experiences, I wonder if the lucid dream is kind of reflecting back to us kind of our energy level at that moment, that we're not really at the at our normally best state. We're kind of unenergized in some respect, and so
Mm.
we have to kind of pump up our energy to kind of balance things.
Okay. So, okay, I just want to reflect back over a lucid dream. So, a lucid dream is when we, the dreamer, right, we go to bed, we fall asleep, and somehow we become conscious in the dream, right, through whatever cues or something triggers us to realize. And usually it's something, right? Something that looks out of place, or maybe we question something with our mind, and all of a sudden, we realize that we are dreaming, right? And we know that a part of us is outside of the dream, fast asleep in bed, dreaming the dream. Now, I have a question. Do you think there is a higher intelligence that's dreaming itself into our physical forms and that our lives are these ongoing dreams and that greater being has the ability to wake up in this dream?
Yeah, what an interesting question. What one thing that I've heard is that when people go into Buddhist dream yoga, and normally there's monasteries that are devoted to Buddhist dream yoga practice,
Mm.
and the young people normally sign up for a 3-year educational stint in Buddhist dream yoga. In fact, they say some of the classes are taught in the dream state, and so you have to be aware enough to be able to pay attention. But but what I've heard is that the very first lesson is all this a dream. And so I think what the monks are trying to tell people isn't that all of this waking stuff is unimportant. What they're trying to say, I believe, is all of this exists as a type of mental creation. So what's a dream? A dream is a creation of the mind. It's a creation of the mind. It's a story. It normally has a narrative and all, but it's a creation of the mind. And if you're full of fears and then you have a nightmare, oh, it's the mind expressing that fear energy into a nightmare and all. It's a creation of the mind. But what's a waking reality? So these Buddhist monks are saying all this a dream. What they're saying is by virtue of your mind, you help create your experience. And so I think that's what they're initially trying to get the new initiates to understand, that waking or dreaming or whatever, when it comes to the mind is helping to create the experience. There's a lot of psychological studies that show the same thing. If you believe or expect something to happen, then it happens. Or if you walk into a grocery store and in the background they're playing music and encouraging you to buy German wines, then all of a sudden you stop and grab some German wine before you go. You don't realize that you're being subconsciously influenced, but they can show studies where this occurs. So again, that's what I think is learning. So whether it's a higher intelligence and all, that's a little bit hard to know. But what I would say though is lucid dreaming just in and of itself teaches us about the nature of the mind. And I think if we go far enough, then we realize, oh my gosh, this thing that I thought was my mind is actually connected to this larger awareness. And then we begin to redefine what it is that the self is. We begin to see the self with a capital S as well.
So we're a co-creator.
I would say that we're a co-creator, because what I see happening in the lucid dream is sometimes the larger awareness brings something to me to see how I'll respond. It's you could say it's like a test, but think of being back in school, in your young days. It wasn't the teacher was mean that he or she gave you a test. It was to see, have you learned the lessons? Are you ready to move forward? And in that way, it's kind of a beautiful and caring instructor who is happy to keep giving you opportunities to grow, to develop, to learn, and continue to move forward. So that's one thing that I would say. Lucid dreaming has definitely shown me that it's an educational device, and by learning the lessons, we can grow and actually begin to connect with the larger aspects of ourselves. There's a lot of neuroscientists out there who say, oh, we only use half the mind, or we don't understand, there's parts of the brain that we don't get, what and all. So I think all of us have the capacity to grow into using the mind, using the brain, using all of this more so. But lucid dreaming might be one of those ways that we actually connect with all of that.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I mean, there was a modern movie done on lucid dreaming called Inception, if I remember correctly. Is that the movie Inception?
Yep, yeah.
Yeah,
And it came out, and you know what? One thing that was interesting about the movie, it's always very entertaining and all. But one thing that I thought was a little bit unusual was to have all these lucid dream gun battles and all this kind of thing, because in a lucid dream, if somebody has a gun, it's a dream gun and a dream bullet, and if you're lucid enough, you'll just like whatever. But in that particular movie, it's kind of like a very Hollywood version of a lucid dream.
Yeah. I guess for entertainment. So, Robert, I guess we've probably covered enough in that. Could we maybe get people information on how they can connect with you, if you do any courses still, your books, your website?
Yeah. If you kind of want to keep up with what I'm doing, you can go to my website, Lucid, Lucid, advice.com, lucidadvice.com. Also in the free online magazine that my friend Lucy and I create at luciddreamingmagazine.com. Not only can you read a bunch of incredible articles on lucid dreams and reader submitted lucid dreams, but there's always a little section about what I'm up to, what workshops and courses I'm doing. I will be doing one here at the end of October of 2024. It's called The Many Worlds of Lucid Dreaming. And I'll be one of 14 other presenters, and this goes on for 2 weeks. And this is being hosted by the International Association for the Study of Dreams, which I'm a member of. And so it's really fascinating, because when you hear from 14 experienced lucid dreamers and see what they're doing, you just see how vast it is, what an open platform lucid dreaming is for discovery and engagement. And also there's a forum where you can ask questions and get advice, on how to improve lucid dreaming technique or things to do and how you go about doing that.
Yeah. And I'll put links to all of them on the interview. So if you just go down into the description, they'll all be there. I'll also link to Robert's books. Yeah. Amazing conversation. Absolutely an amazing guest, and such a fountain of knowledge and wisdom on lucid dreaming. Robert, thank you so much.
Thanks, Gareth. This has been a lot of fun, and thanks so much for your questions.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all the viewers and listeners. Thank you so much. Till the next time. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye, Robert. Bye.
This has been the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds. Gareth is a lifelong seeker of truth, a spiritual teacher and author, and it's his passion to delve into the profound world of consciousness. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten something from it. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, the podcast is available on YouTube and all the major podcasting platforms. Find us on Instagram at _mother_force. Take care, and we'll see you soon on the Endless Possibilities Podcast.